So, words of a former overachiever, if you will. I have been getting into a good flow of things recently, so subsequently, I feel that I have been able to get out of my shell more these days. That is to talk to other people, share each other's progress on things we're working on, and then, dreams, plans for the future, that sort of stuff. The usual productive, hopeful conversations that's quite fortunate from young adults like I am, as the much older ones would think. I think. This comes too with more exposure to that wild world of conventional success. I say conventional because it's everywhere. It's on every social media platform, every friend group and family unit, every modern society, basically. That expectation for people, especially those deemed to be better in whatever way than the average, again, whatever that means, to achieve. To achieve, here I take that as a verb with no object because recently I've realized that most of the time the object of that achievement doesn't matter as long as one takes that action on. Sure, there are fields that are more acceptable than the others, where one would get support from the get go just because success is assumed and certain. But really, as long as one gets to where one is expected to, as in one achieves something, to most others, the means don't matter. As long as you get the money, you get the house and the car, you get that lifestyle, that fame, or whatever you'd have achieved. And then the rest of your life just becomes a matter of maintaining that status. And notoriety is very much an effective way to success. It's not as talked about, I think, or as promoted as a means because there's this facade that it's unacceptable. But really, if you think about it, notorious individuals and groups have an easier time getting accepted into society or respected even than some others who aren't notorious. Hence, that web that those who are simply beginning to establish themselves in society as their own individuals get caught into. What else can one do but seek that path of security, that path of acceptance? Now, there's nothing wrong with that, of course, and even I wouldn't really care about the means that others would take or whatever goals others have. But in the recent mornings, I have been waking up with an unidentified unease of some sort, which today I have determined that to be the web I got myself caught around with. I think the image I've set up with a web might have been more negative than I had imagined, but it's simply more like an almost invisible spider's web that I, someone faintly amused with spiders and the like, absentmindedly walked into. Like walking into a garden and then realize that there's a web in that path that I'm walking on. But since it's just a web, it's pretty easy to get out of. And it's more of that the realization is not without some humor for myself. After all those days of routinely working at things, which I admit is quite natural for a recovering workaholic like I am, the temptation to think of the future, of that results, successes, and surprisingly arrived at every random hour. They would come knocking into my office door and I would just frantically think of the next steps to appease them, to ensure that I will get there, to the places that I have envisioned, to the things that I'm striving for, to the achievement I am expected to get to all of those plans, goals, objectives. I would work at everything I could work on and do everything I could do. All of those things. But now I sit in front of my desk and I had scribbled those words in the messiest handwriting that I can write with at the moment. That what I have right now, where I am in right now, this whole current state is much, much better than all of those other things in my imagination, than anything from that so called future I could think of. For one, perhaps it's because those things yet to come would require more of things than this present does. There's more effort, more energy, more time, and all other things that I'd have to I'd have to put out when I get to that future, because there's more work to do when you're there, there's more progress to get to, all of that sorts of things, and many other changes would have to occur first. Much of life would have to flow through before that ebb of difference arrives. And then another would be is that knowing that such might happen sooner rather than later. So there are all of these visions in the future, and I might have been thinking that they'd come in 5 years, 10 years' time, but I don't really know. Things might change tomorrow drastically, and I wouldn't know it. I wouldn't have had that planned. And so comes this more self induced pressure to prepare and be as ready as possible. And then subsequently, the overwhelm from not really knowing what that means. Because if I wouldn't know when it's going to happen, how am I really going to prepare for it? And then the one argument that I am most certain of is that this here and now is much better than any of those thoughts, than any of those envisioned future, because this one actually exists. This is real, and this one's the only thing I'm sure of. The next phase of what is now might drastically change for the better. Like the things that I imagine, maybe I wouldn't have to put in that much effort, or I wouldn't have to wait that much longer. But still, who knows? I can try to predict, I can try to analyze and do all those sorts of stuff, but why should I trouble myself with that if there's no certainty of an answer anyway? And honestly, I've been realizing that the best sort of success or result is the one that comes surprisingly. Like as someone who likes to plan out things, who likes to and takes comfort in certainty, in knowing what's going to happen next. I've been finding myself more amused and more um, entertained with the thought of surprises, and especially success or good stuff that comes surprisingly. And probably that's because more of these things have been happening ever since I've tried to lessen my grip on specific outcomes. Like when I would do that, when I'd stop thinking about results or of the future and simply just let myself fully embrace is, whatever is in this moment. When after many other moments have passed, I look back and realize that I got even farther than where I had thought I'd be, than where I would have set myself up for, farther than the goal I had in mind, simply because I just let life take me where I ought to be. And maybe, probably, I would have ended up wherever I was supposed to end up anyway. So, yeah, let's just see where things go. Okay, now I have class.